Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ave Maria Press Professional Development Webinar Series. In this webinar, Katie Gray will share proven strategies for intentional outreach, building strong support networks, and empowering teens to take an active role in their parish community. My name is Erin. Oops, let me see. There we go. My name is Erin Pierce. I am the publicist at Ave Maria Press. Everyone in the audience is muted today, but you are able to ask questions. Questions can be sent to our presenter using the questions section here on the GoToWebinar panel, and I'll read as many of those as possible at the end of the presentation today. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you tomorrow via email. With that, I would like to welcome and introduce our presenter today. Katie Gray serves as the Director of Parish Outreach for Life Teen. She is passionate about Life Teen's mission of restoring every parish and reaching teens by creating sustainable youth ministry in parishes across the globe. Prior to joining Life Teen in 2014, Katie served as a parish youth minister for many years. So she knows a thing or two about sleepless nights, from retreats, crazy ministry hours, and the joy of watching a teen encounter Christ for the first time. Katie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Erin. Great to be here with you all.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, I'll let you take it from here.
Hey, everyone. Grateful to be with you. Thanks for that fun introduction, Erin. I come to you from St. Louis, where I, like Erin said, am Director of Parish Outreach for Life Teen, and have been here just shy of 11 years. Time flies when you're in ministry. So super excited to spend the time with you this afternoon talking about sustainability inside of our parishes from a youth ministry perspective. Kick us off, I think we'll get going with a prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, you are good and you are faithful and you are generous. We praise you and thank you for this day, for this week, and for this Advent season. And we beg you, Lord, that you would help us slow down and embrace all that this season has to offer. That it would be in tune with the way that your Holy Spirit is moving in our lives and in our ministries. And that everything that we do, Lord, is continuously directed back to you. That you would abundantly bless the efforts of the youth leaders on this call today. And that you would help them remember that in all that they do and all that they say, they are loved immensely by you. Mother Mary, we ask you to continue to wrap us in your mantle of protection and take us to a more deep and intimate relationship with your Son. We pray this in your name. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. I'm going to chat a little bit today about sustainable youth ministry and the gift that I think we provide for not only the teens that are currently engaged inside of our parishes now, but the teens yet to come. And so that all really starts with how we set everything up for today. And we're at Life Teen, we focus so intentionally on our parishes, on the idea that the work and the effort that you all do inside of parishes, that those efforts have such a ripple effect on hopefully teenagers knowing the love of the Lord, but then their families and then parishioners, and that would be something that would continue long after we are in the role that we are in at our parishes. I like to think about the reality that I kind of hope that we get forgotten in the process, because we are setting up parishes to be at a place where youth are a priority in everything that is always being done, and that they are important in what the focus is. And so over at Life Teen, our team specifically wants to make sure that we're empowering parishes, that we're remembering that everything that a parish leader does is thinking long-term, which kind of is hard, right? Because there's always a lot that's happening in real time, especially if you're at a parish right now and you're thinking about maybe some of the commitments that are going on unrelated to youth, but are specific to the Advent season, or maybe even the preparations for Christmas or a new year. We know that there's an ongoing to-do list inside of our parishes. But thinking long-term, thinking strategically, which doesn't always have that set aside time every year, is really critical so that long after we have moved into whatever season or life or a journey or adventure we're called to next, that everything is set up really well. And I think about the idea around how we get a chance to share that sustainability within those parishes that we are with. When I think about a lot of the factors that Life Teen has identified over the last 40 years, we think about what has made a parish have a vibrant and thriving youth ministry that has had that ripple effect. Something that has been in place for 10, 20, 30, 40 years inside of their parish, and that the culture around parishes that say teenagers matter to us. And they're not just here in service of us. We don't just ask teens to sign up for service hours or to do things that we need, but we create an environment that is welcoming and hospitable and engaging to them, and all of the things that help them feel like they matter when they're there. And those sustainable factors have been pieces that we over here have identified over the last couple of years and really focused on as we think long term, what do these look like inside of our parish? So right now, some of you may be sitting there thinking like, we have a lot of these things in place and that's really great. And others may be saying, man, we're still really in a transition stage. We're still talking to parishes who are coming out of the pandemic and even trying to figure out if they will still be standing in the next 5 to 10 years. But how important it is that no matter what season our ministry is in, we're able to evaluate and think, okay, what does that look like over the next couple of years so that we can put right things in place for long term. And so I'm going to walk through these a little bit and then we'll break them open in some of the ways that you guys can think about how this is currently in place at your parishes. Our first one that we really identified as a sustainable factor is to have support from a priest. And that a supportive priest may look incredibly different from parish to parish in how that involvement or that advocacy or that financial support can look. But the idea that a priest is on board with understanding that youth are important. I had one single priest. He had no associates with him. There were 3,000 registered families in the parish. It was obviously harder for him to make it to every youth gathering that we had. He couldn't go on every fall retreat, but how we could make sure that he was still incorporated, involved, connected to the teens. And then he was advocating for what that looked like when he wasn't always around youth ministry, but that he was telling parishioners about the importance of youth ministry. I always love to tell the story that while he wasn't always able to be in tune with every detail that was happening, he knew the vision, he knew the goals. And I would always like to tell him before and after Mass a little bit of tidbit about different parishioners so that he would be able to kind of feel like I was like the Secret Service and I was like leaning in to tell him something really important so that he could be super on and tell the kids like, hey, I heard that you guys won that soccer game. That's incredible. But a supportive priest really does matter in something that is sustainable. And we've seen the reality that that supportive priest setup may mean that he's stretched and he has 3 parishes that he oversees now. But so again, that support looks different, but that's a huge piece of what's sustainable. The second big part of what we really lean into as a sustainable factor is our core team. And a core team being the adult mentors, the leaders that are really the heart of the ministry who focus on relational ministry, which is our bedrock. We talk about relational ministry as this foundational piece in building and modeling relationships that are healthy, happy, and holy so that these teenagers feel known and seen and loved by the leaders. And that core team who focuses on that, who helps a teenager feel seen when they walk through the door, who talks to them, who engages with them, and who connects with them, that is the stuff that people remember. I always like to ask the question, do you remember every talk you've ever heard, or everything from catechism class when you were little, or every phenomenal homily? No offense, but I haven't. But I have remembered a lot of the people who played a role in me feeling that witness of God's love. And that came from a core team. A core team is something that we have really identified as a success factor to have something, not only a sustainable youth ministry program, but to be really vital when there's transition inside of parishes, which we can surely anticipate, whether that is the priest or the youth minister or other people inside of it that come in and out of the role of youth leadership, that it is important that a core team who is dedicated and committed to the parish and the teenagers and their faith will play a profound impact on what that looks like for a sustainable program. This really came true, as I have seen, during COVID, when a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of parishes had to furlough and lay off those youth ministers, but a core team really kept things going and connected, which is really what we hope for, is that even in the midst of transition, teenagers know that they can consistently rely on the parish to be there to minister and support and serve them. The other piece that we really lean into a lot for a sustainable factor is a large group catechetical gathering, a place that is open and excited and consistent in teaching the faith, and in a place where teenagers feel like they are welcome and can bring their friends. In addition to that, we would definitely have a time where there are small groups, where there are places where teens can share, maybe in conversation, where they can grow in discipleship with each other, where they can learn how to have a conversation about their faith, maybe in a little bit more of an intimate setting, and they can ask the questions, where they can wrestle with the things that the church is saying that is different than what the world is saying, but that they can have the conversation in a safe space to be able to ask those questions and then feel like they are starting to grow and understand, along with their peers and their leaders, the truth of the gospel. Another big part that we would really focus on is a youth-focused liturgy that's welcoming and inclusive to all parishioners. A place that maybe teenagers feel like they can be trained to be lectors, or they can lead the hospitality ministry, where they can be play different roles inside of the Mass, whether that was offertory, or maybe they play inside of a band, or they're a part of the music that is being sung and played at the Mass in a way that feels invited and that they have a space there. Maybe inside of the homily, the priest or the deacon is able to address them in their world, can find something relatable. You know, I laughed the other day because our priest, who's probably 74, and he's in residence, so he's on his way out, but he made a comment about a song that was very regularly played on the radio. And I was laughing because I saw all these teenagers smile. Like, it's kind of funny when you hear your 74-year-old priest quote a Jelly Roll song. But I appreciated it because it makes a connection for them, so that there is a focus in helping these teenagers know that we're so glad you're here, that you matter to us when you are here. Another piece of a sustainable factor would be retreats. That we find that the idea of walking away, taking that time away, is so important, and for us, for them, but for the chance for these teenagers to have a time where they walk away from whatever the busyness or the day-to-day humdrum of life might look like, and have that chance to have that encounter with the Lord. Speaking of encounters, summer encounters for teenagers, where they would be able to sort of have that mountaintop experience. You know, we think about some of those ideas that help teenagers stay Catholic, and many of them, you know, you think about the adult mentors, the consistent youth gatherings, and that mountaintop experience. I know for me, going to my first mountaintop experience, my Steubenville Youth Conference at Mid-America, I remember seeing the number of teenagers that were also there. And I felt there was such a different environment when I get to see all of these Catholics. The summer encounter also just is a space where sometimes teenagers have more time to be able to dive in. We value social gatherings, that there should be gatherings for teenagers that would create a place where we have joy and community. It's so important that we have that space for teenagers to have fun when they are gathering together and building upon that community. The community almost drives sometimes the consistency if teenagers want to keep coming and be back together with each other. And the last piece of sustainable factors that we've really identified over the last 40 years is that the parish itself has an ongoing commitment to youth ministry and to core training. and that those pieces really play a role in, especially when there's a transition of staffing, but that there's an understanding that we believe that youth is a priority to us, and whoever is inside of that role of youth minister or director of religious education or whomever it is that's overseeing the program will still, even in the midst of transition, the parish is still behind support and advocacy and creating a space for those teenagers to have those encounters. One of the things that we think is really interesting to think about is when we go to look at this, most of us have a lot of these things in place. Whether it's at different tiers or what it looks like might be a little bit different, but everyone has different versions of this already inside of their program. But some of them could be incredibly more fine-tuned. It could be the opportunity where we can really hone in on parts of those, maybe 2 at a time each year, to make them the best version that they could be. I love to think about the concept of setting up our team. You know, at the end of the day, regardless of how phenomenal of a youth minister you are, we can't do it alone. I had a phenomenal core team, and they ebbed and flowed, and people came in and out because of different life things that were happening. But to set them up for success is really the biggest part of having something that is sustainable. We want a group of people who are in different seasons of life, who have different stages in the journey, who are parishioners from different parts of our world to be a part of this team. The gifts and talents that I possessed were very different than other core members. And what a cool opportunity that was for students who maybe didn't necessarily relate to the same version of me. I can be a lot of energy. I can be a lot of excitement. I'm an external processor. I'm incredibly type A. And sometimes, as my introvert husband reminds me, it's really helpful to have other people who have other gifts and talents to be able to connect with other teenagers. He always says, you're not everyone's cup of tea every day, Katie Gray. And sometimes there's truth to that. So I think it's important that we find a team of people that would be able to showcase a lot of different gifts and talents and can connect with different teenagers, different personalities, different lives that they have. And so it's good to have the diversity inside of that. When we think about setting up our team, I think sometimes we go into the world of, well, I serve middle school, or I serve confirmation, or I serve high school, when in all actuality, a core team, the heart of the ministry, is really everyone who serves those youth and those young adults. And what does that look like? It's starting to try to figure out where inside of your parish are there silos that are set up that are saying, well, I teach this, or I only take care of that group, or I only serve the confirmation candidates, and then that's like the only place that we ever interact. Wouldn't it be cool if we had a team of people who acted like they were under one umbrella? We're one big team of people, and maybe I specifically week by week am taking care of middle school, but overall that I'm assuming I'm a part of this big core team versus this silo or that silo. Obviously, I think that that's important for many reasons, but one in particular I think that's incredibly helpful is that we're starting to help equip each of the ministries with enough of an understanding of what each other does. So it's good to have other people who are taking care of middle school also have a great understanding of confirmation and of high school, so that when we're helping these teenagers grow in their journey of discipleship, we're encouraging them to participate in possibly other ministries, because we are not just, I only do this, and then as soon as they're finished with me, I pass them off to the next group. As a team, we should be thinking long-term about how this is all one group and that we can thread them through over the course of 6th grade through 12th grade. I think it's important that we have an ongoing recruitment plan. Oftentimes we find ourselves where we kind of recruit our team to set up to go live in September, and then we do a school year's worth of ministry. But what does an ongoing recruitment plan actually look like? And what does that look like when we think about what our current core members are also doing? Are they inviting other people in to prayerfully consider and discern what it looks like to be part of the team? But creating an actual recruitment plan that isn't only married to a specific time of the year is really helpful. And to utilize people inside of the parishes to sort of be your recruiters. How are they helping you sort of vet folks that are out there? One of my new favorite terms, I have 2 new favorite terms. The first one is manufactured urgency, which I think we all should just really make sure we sit with that within the seasons of ministry. What is actually manufactured urgency versus real urgency? But the second one I've really come to love is the terminology called name storming. And so the idea of, are we constantly name storming and adding names to a list of people that we would like to prayerfully ask to discern to be a part of the team? And then what does that look like? Before you ask people, though, we need to make sure we clearly have communicated expectations. I tossed up here right now an old Life Team Ministry description, which shows for you essentially a task that I had back in 2023. And it has our Life Team core values on it and our pillars and some big outcomes that are expected. And then the day-to-day expectations and kind of what essentially my ministry function looks like. This would be a little bit intense to hand to a core member or a potential core member, but I would encourage to make sure that there is ministry descriptions not only set up for everyone in the roles that are a part of the parish, but the core team as well. And maybe the core team has a variety of different roles inside of it. I'm part of the core team, but I feed the teenagers. I'm part of the core team, but I help with retreats. I'm part of the core team, but I do parent communication. I'm part of the core team, fill in the blank, but finding a way to have some clearly communicated expectations. I'm finding lately that the question around asking people to be a part of a team can be somewhat intimidating. And as I go around the country and I train parishes, I encounter a lot of leaders who say there's no one left to ask. And I think there has to be a few more. There always has to be a few more. But sometimes the fear of asking is that because we're asking something that feels too soft, gentle, or vague. So we're like, ooh, I don't want them to say no. So I'm gonna find a way to like really make it feel appealing and sort of craft it how they want. But the clearly communicated expectations could go such a long way. We want them to be able to let their yes mean yes and their no mean no. And we hope that they say yes, right? But at the end of the day, the more clearly communicated we have put out what we need from them for maybe the next 12 months, then they know that they can be set up for success in that. So clearly defining, what am I going to ask for these people? What is that actually going to look like? I talk to a lot of newer youth ministers who say to me like, oh, it's just me and my friend that are being the core members. And that's fun, but also it's not sustainable. And so what are we thinking about how we can invest core members of different seasons and stages, like I said, and then they feel successful to want to continue to be a part of it if they're called to. I'd ask you to also evaluate what your healthy communication looks like right now with the core team, whoever it is that you currently have in place. How could it be improved, and what does that look like? Are you someone who's just like, I haphazardly text the plans for the session that afternoon? Do I have everything lined up? Are they communicating back with me? And what does that need to look like so that we can go in with an understanding of how to best communicate so everyone is on the same page and everything can run really smoothly? I would love every week we would get together as a core team about 30 minutes ahead of our session, our life night, and we would pray a spiritual warfare prayer, and we would kind of just pray over the night, and we would pray for any special intentions we knew about going on with our teens. And then whoever was leading the session, because it wasn't always me, would go through the session with us and kind of say, this is what's happening, this. And it was great because then we were all on the same page. And we had done that in a couple of different seasons and versions, whether it was at meetings, over email communication, or in person ahead of the session. But getting everyone on the same page. It's worth evaluating probably annually about how effective your communication looks. A ministry project and focus to the core team is also really something long-term that you would want to think about. So what does it look like to minister to the core team? I think a lot about parishes who have a lot of older upperclassmen who are serving maybe their middle school teenagers, or on occasion helping with maybe a peer leadership type of setup inside of their parishes. And I always ask as the first question, when are those teenagers who are leading being ministered to? Because similarly to those high school seniors who are being great leaders, we want them to be ministered to while they are ministering. Because we would say the same thing to us as leaders, that we should also not use the specific youth group time as an opportunity to be our ministry. We need to be ministered to. And so maybe carving out time within the year where a core team attends a retreat or has a day of recollection. Maybe you can invite your pastor over to share with the core team at the head of maybe Advent or Lent, or you can give them a time where there's a chance for a really good prayer, and to utilize that as like, what does that ministry to them really look like? And the last piece I think that's really important and also kind of scary is that we propose to everyone in our core team to take time annually to discern if they're called to continue to be a part of the team. And this is intimidating because, you know, you always have those really solid leaders that you're like, oh, please don't say no, please don't say no. But life changes and people grow and things happen. And we want people to be able to be totally fair to the ministry and to fair to themselves, that we want people to feel like they don't have to have a foot in each door, but that they can know exactly where the Lord is asking them to be this year. I had a core member who was phenomenal, but her husband got transferred in the military. I had a core member who said that her mom was really sick and she needed to step away and take care of her. I had a core member who got a new job and said, this is just really demanding on my time, and he couldn't come back. But I think at the end of it all, the best version of core teams are the ones who are committed there and consistent. And so to be able to ask that question for them to prayerfully discern and let you know, I think is really, really important. I also go back to the reality that the annual discernment piece can be hard because that might mean that we don't have a full team going into the next year, which is why an ongoing recruitment plan is incredibly necessary. I met this wonderful youth minister and I laughed because she said, every time I go to ask anyone to be a part of my core team or to do anything, they just run away. Like, no one at the parish wants to talk to me because I'm just going to ask them to do something. And I was like, girl, you should own that. You need to put a t-shirt together that says, I'm going to ask you to be a part of my team, and just let it be a reality. But the team is the boulder that when we push up the mountain and we do it incredibly well and we put in the time and effort, we last a lot longer. I don't know how frequently you all do a SWOT analysis, but I would encourage you at a time between now and maybe like late spring to really spend time with your current core members, maybe even your pastor, and to talk through what are our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities and threats that we're experiencing at our youth ministry program right now. I always say this and then I always put a little asterisk next to it because I think sometimes we're really good at writing our weaknesses and our threats, and sometimes we fail to really focus in on the great strengths and the opportunities that exist. So whenever I teach this, I always encourage parishes to put no more than 5 weaknesses and no more than 5 threats on each of the time that they do it. But to sit with that and to really prayerfully say, like, with the opportunities that go hand in hand with the weaknesses, what can we do next year that would be really exciting? What is the Lord asking us to do that might be out of our comfort zone from something we've done for a number of years? And how do we really dive into that, focused on a handful of goals and not everything? We can't eat an elephant in one bite, amen? So let's make sure that we're taking it one bite at a time and having very focused goals. I'd encourage you all to do this annually with your team and think about the ways that you can really hone in on those strengths and those opportunities. And I think as we kind of wrap up a little bit, as I think about the sustainable factors, I really go back to a thing that my pastor shared with me, Father Jim shared with me when I had started at the parish. And he said, the youth of the parish of St. Catherine Labouré are really important to us. And so how do we make sure that we tell everyone in the parish about it? And we were having this great conversation during a meeting, and he really wanted to hone in on asking, how do we make sure that we're sharing the impact? If your parish youth ministry kind of meets on its own thing and it's, run by volunteers, or even if it's someone who's hired, but you're meeting and you're just sort of doing your own thing, but it's not super interwoven with the rest of the parish, they may miss out on finding out and seeing all the really phenomenal ways that God is moving. I always think about the messaging in terms of a couple of things. The elevator pitch when it comes to sharing about inviting someone to be part of the core team. Could you, if tasked with that right now, think about what you are saying to invite someone in to be a part of the ministry? And could you do it in a way that is convincing and inspiring and joyful? And then also, could you do it in a way that doesn't only talk about the logistics of it? When asked, what is youth ministry at the parish, the temptation might mean to talk about when you meet and what content you cover. Or maybe it's someone who you feel like isn't super engaged in the parish, and so you're tempted to say, we have a lot of fun because that's always been the culture, and we play games, and or you have other people who are like, we really want to make sure you talk about apologetics, so you gear that messaging toward that. What about the messaging though? If you and your pastor and a core member and a parent were all sitting in a room, would look uniform? Because I think it's important, while we can have our own version, our own experience to share, and we can personalize that, what is the messaging we're hoping that folks are hearing when they come into the parish? The other day on Sunday, there was a family that sat in front of us, and we have 4 kids, so I always notice other families who have 4 kids because I love when they sit next to us, because I want to be like, yes, yeah, like come sit with us. We're not totally put together either. And family comes into mass, never seen them before. Okay, sounds good. I was like, okay, meet them at the sign of peace, hi, etc. Then at 4 p.m. we had like the Advent choir concert. So the children's choir and the adult choir are all singing. So we're out there, and that family walks in. And then my family went out to dinner, and we're sitting at the Mexican restaurant we always go to, and that family walks in. And so that's it. Now I gotta go talk to them. So I go over and I introduce myself and all the things, because I don't know a stranger apparently. And we're over there and we're having a conversation, and we got talking about the parish and just all of the things about the parish. They were newer, and they were just really excited to be a part of St. Catherine's. And it just made me think in that time, like if someone were to ask about youth ministry, would I be saying the vision and the goals of this parish's youth ministry program? Like as a parent of a current middle schooler, could I say that? I was the youth minister there 15 years ago, so I could say what I maybe said 15 years ago. But just what does that look like? And how are we sharing that message and that impact? I am a proponent of the bulletin, but I also know there's more to messaging and impact that doesn't only shine through a bulletin. And so I would also encourage you to ask your team, how are we sharing impact? How are we sharing glory stories? How are we even recording glory stories? Like, have we reached the point where we're able to remember all of the good things that God is doing week after week after week after week? Or are we just on a hamster wheel of just racing through another year of ministry? Good ministry, but just because it's just a constant go, go, go. But the messaging on impact and glory stories comes from the people who get to see that, which is us. And so in all reality, we should really be thinking about how are we sharing about encounter, that these teenagers are having these transformations. That's on us. Go back to Father Jim's comment. But really, if we get a firsthand look at watching teenagers fall in love with Jesus Christ, we get the opportunity to share that. And if we're coming from a parish that has a culture where they view teenagers more as, oh, teens could come do service for us, or why aren't the teens always in church? Maybe what could help that is if we worked a little bit more on our messaging. The last thing I wanted to share was just kind of some of the best practices that I've really seen parishes thrive when they focus on these things. It goes hand in hand with our sustainable factors, but just encouraging every year for there to be an understanding of like, what of these pieces are we focusing on, or could we focus on even a little bit more? Creating a vision and goals and articulating that vision and goal. Make sure that people know what we are working towards, what we are fighting for. I love to tell this story about when I was youth minister and I had a parent named Wendy who really wanted us to host a mixer for 7th and 8th graders. And I really didn't want to host a mixer. I was like not feeling it at all. And I was like, the liability and all the things, Wendy, and like all the things. And finally she was she was nonstop asking. And finally I was like, Wendy, it's just not on the strategic plan. And honestly, I think only the grace of God said those words, because I did not at the time have a strategic plan at all in place. But it gave me a chance to start thinking about, I want this to be here long after I'm gone, which means there should be a vision and there should be goals set in place so that annually we know what are we focusing on. We can't do it all in one time, in one setting, but we can really focus on a couple of things incredibly well. I've spent time with enough core teams where I always do a spaghetti on the wall exercise where I'm like, just throw out ideas. What do you think the Lord might be asking y'all to do? And we throw out a whole bunch of ideas too. And then we pause and we go, we can't do it all this year. And so we pick 3 and we focus on 3 specific goals that they're going to make sure are really fine-tuned, that it's focusing on the experience for the teenagers and their parents and the families to get to know the Lord. Building a team, I talked a lot about that today, but whatever season your team is in, making sure that they're feeling empowered and equipped and being able to continuously invite others into that. That's inviting parents and teenagers. That's going out of the campus boundaries of your parish and inviting teenagers. It's calling the local high schools and asking if you can be a part of activities and you could be present there. It's getting to know what's happening inside of the community and seeing where you can find and get to know teenagers. There's teenagers everywhere. And I'm one of those people where I'll talk to teenagers anywhere that we go, anywhere we walk. And my 7th grader is completely embarrassed by me. And I'm like, hey, I can't not say hi. It's all about inviting people. It's being a ministry of presence. Training and preparing teenagers, even preparing your upperclassmen, whether that's for opportunities to share their faith or be ministers themselves in various ways inside of your parish, but that is an ongoing committed piece of a best practice. Understanding Gen Z / Gen Alpha. I know we're moving into the little Gen Alpha too now, but the idea around what's going on with them. And so some of that comes with us doing our own research. Some of that comes with us just subscribing and just doing some learning to be open and curious about what is happening in their world. There's even this really fun thing that I love to read. My husband's in finance, so he sends it to me. But quarterly, essentially, it sends me where the teenagers are spending their money. And so it goes through a lot of brands and it talks about like, well, now people are more spending money at Raising Cane's, and it gives you the whole spectrum every quarter on where teenagers are spending their money. I think it's fascinating. And there's stuff like that everywhere that we can dive into just to learn a little bit more about the people that we get to take care of and we get to serve. Partnering with parents, whatever that looks like inside of your parish, I would just make sure you're asking the question, are we transactional with parents or are we relational with parents? Specifically to the point of asking, do we only send out emails and ask for communication and, hey, drop your kid off here and deliver this and we need this form signed? Or do we create space where we get to know those parents relationally? And what does that look like? My favorite one was parking lot ministry. It was really easy. You could hand out decaf coffee and hot chocolate in the winter months when they were waiting to pick up their middle schooler. There's a lot of opportunity that we could do where we invite other parents to be our partners in creating space to do ministry. Sharing impact and glory stories, like I said, how are we taking record of that? How are we reflecting on all that God is doing? And then having the opportunity to be the witnesses and share that. And evaluating to grow. At the end of the day, like I said, we hope that long from now, there is parishes that are thriving and vibrant, and that youth is a priority year after year after year. And that comes with every year pausing and stopping to take time to evaluate the successes, the challenges, and to stretch ourselves as we want to grow and continuously reach more teenagers to know the love of the Lord. I'm gonna shoot it back to Erin in a second, and I'm here for some questions, but I did just want to toss my contact information at the screen so that if there was anything you wanted to chit chat about or you wanted to learn more about Life Teen, you could find us over there in the hopes that we could help continuously support parishes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Katie. I'm going to give you a second to take your breath. Maybe have a sip of water. And invite those of you on with us today to ask Katie the burning question you've had regarding youth ministry and your experiences. Here I already have a comment. Thank you so much, Katie Gray. You did amazing. Here's a question too. What do you do when you're trying to set expectations for a core team, but they've had little to no expectations with the previous youth ministry?
What a great question. I think I would first tee it up and ask them how they would define the role of a core team member. So I would invite them to be the first proponents of what they thought it would look like. And then I would even say, what about this, and propose some more ideas inside of that too. It might be a growing conversation, but I would start with what they thought was the best practices and then add in your own in the process. And I think it's important to say, hey, like these are hard conversations to have, but the reality is the teens deserve the best. And like the best sometimes feels hard because we live in a world where sometimes we can ebb and flow into what's expected of us. But I also think that they want to be successful in what they do. And so maybe inside of asking them how they would also define their expectations, I would ask them how they would define if they're successful as a core team member. I laugh because I'm at the parish where I was a youth minister, and people have said, like, you want to be on the core team. And knowing what I know about a true core member, I know I can't commit to it right now. But if they asked me tomorrow to make a pot of spaghetti for 50 people every other Sunday, I know I could commit to that right now and that I'd be successful at it. And so I think you have to help them figure out what do they think is the expectations that they can best do, and maybe how would you feel successful at the end of a year as a core member, and open up that conversation, and then maybe say, hey, I'm going to prayerfully discern what I think our expectations are for the coming year, and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, great. Lots to think about there. Another question, how do you confront the wall folks that are afraid of speaking to youth? What resources are available to help adults meeting teens?
You know, it's so funny you say that because I had a great core member who now works on my team, who did not speak a lot to youth, but was not a wallflower. So she was awesome at standing with the introverted teens as an introvert, just being a ministry of presence. And she didn't feel like she had to fill in the silence, and they certainly didn't feel like she had to fill in the silence because they didn't want to be doing that. And so she was awesome at just being with them. So maybe the ask is less of go in and like interact with them, but it's more like we just want to have you be a ministry of presence with them. And then I love this example too, Erin. When I think about when I walk into a party or a place where I have been invited, if someone says my name or comes up to me or engages with me, it is a completely different and positive feeling than if I have to sort of as a teen walk around the room and try to figure out how to interact. So it's an act of charity to get off the wall as a leader and to say, I am here to help this kid feel like they matter as they walked through this room. And that's like, that ministry of presence does not have to be a, hey, woohoo, we're so glad you're here, because that's the Katie Gray version of it. But the Claire version of it would have stood right there and been like, hey, how are you? And been very happy just standing there, even if they're watching other kids do other things. It's just about being present to them.
In whatever unique way you are, right? Unique to you as a, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So people don't feel alone. Because at the end of the day, too, a teen walks through your doors, and that is our chance to help them feel like they belong. And if we miss the mark on it, we may not see them.
Right.
Yeah. So it's about belonging and helping people feel welcome. And, you know, I was in charge of hospitality for our Life Teen Mass every Sunday. And I was the best, I have to say, at finding everyone a seat. I'm going to make sure, I know you want to stand in the back, but oh boy, are we going to make sure you find a seat. And I wanted people to feel like I knew their name. I was so glad they walked through those doors. Like, this is so good that you're here. And that's what a core team gets to do, is look at a teenager, and we have no idea what has happened in their day. And so if we get to be the part where, say, like, no matter what has happened outside of these walls, like, you being here is so great. We're so happy to see you. I think that goes a long way. And to do that, we have to get off the wall.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking too that when approached to be a core team member, right, somebody might think, oh gosh, I can't explain the faith well enough, right? But it's not really about that.
No,
you know, right.
My favorite pitch was always, someone said, love Jesus, love teenagers, I'll teach you everything else. You know, like, and if you just do those two things, the rest will come as we teach you. We're all learning. Even if someone's like, oh, I know some youth ministry stuff, we're still all learning as we go into core member as well. And the other note too, Erin, if there's core members who are still kind of acclimating to the idea or the structure or the setup that you have, maybe as they enter in the room, you have like literal setup structured games ready to be played. Because maybe it's best to enter in when there's a doing versus a being. And so whether that's a deck of cards, or whether that, I mean, if you have the ability to go outside and kick around a soccer ball until you like start your catechesis or something like that. But then there's also a puzzle. Like if you have a dedicated space to just dump a puzzle out that can sit on a table, and as kids come in, they can participate in that. You know, like I think there's all, you know, I'm a big advocate every parish should have a Frisbee, because a Frisbee is a low entry relational ministry opportunity. Anyone can be a Frisbee player. They don't have to, unless they're that one person who played it in college and is like really hung up on their success. But the goal is to help people feel like it's cool that you're here. So you could create space where they can be a part of something, and it doesn't have to be a, oh, we're playing soccer and we already picked our 9 and 9. You could be like, come on, let's go, just jump on. Or, hey, we're gonna do chalk, because maybe some of the girls are like artists or whatever it is. And so creating a space where people can do something and not just kind of retreat with their phone or to a corner of the room. And core members can be as successful in that too, because they're like, oh, I'm better at doing than being. I am also, like, as a human, Katie Gray is better at doing than being too, which is why, like, sometimes I don't sit in prayer as long as I could be like, I could go to mass for 3 hours all the time. But like, the idea around, I have this activity, minute to win it games, you know, like I have a goal to do a game and you come play it and it works as we kind of get to interact together. That might be another way to interact with them. And then my favorite one that we used to do, there was a season where we felt like we needed to elevate our relational ministry. So we got a bowl of questions, and then every session, before every life night, we would pick out a question, and then you would have to organically get it answered inside of that before everything got started for the session. So like you just had to talk to kids, and you had to figure out a way to talk about a question about Taco Bell or whatever it was. But the goal was to get us engaged with them, and pretty soon they caught on and whatever. But like, if core members are less apt to just jump in, you can also strategically set them up to be successful by creating structured stuff.
Yeah. And I imagine this would vary from parish to parish, but about how many would make a good core team?
Yeah, great question. The number we usually go off of is what you would have as number of kids in a small group to a leader. And so ideally you would have a 6-to-1 ratio.
Okay, that's good to know. Yes. Okay, we got some other questions here. What would you say is the most important advice for someone starting from scratch when there's not been a lot of youth involvement in the parish?
Cool. I love it. Those are my favorite.
Challenge, right?
That's right. I would say what's kind of fun is you really get to help design what the next 5 to 10 years of that looks like, which is really exciting. But a big part of it is you are going to have to go out and meet every ministry, and you're going to have to talk about where youth ministry is headed with excitement and joy. It's essentially like you become a marketing strategist in the next year. And what does that look like? But going back to that vision and those goals, and essentially it would be making sure there's a core team that's set up, and that you have consistent gatherings, and that people know that you're there. And where are you headed, and what does that look like? And to never assume that everyone understands what the youth ministry is until you've told them, because you have to essentially teach and invite them in. And even if that's, hey, we're going to go to the Rosary group, and we're going to go to the Knitters, and we're going to go to the Men's Association and the Knights of Columbus, because everyone loves the Knights of Columbus. You're going to go and you're going to say like, hey, here's some teens. We want to tell you what we're doing. If you know teenagers, tell them about it. If you like want to just pray for us, we'll love that too. But it's really sort of casting that vision parish wide, and being like echoing constantly, where are we going? What are we doing? How exciting this is to invite teenagers in, and then to be bold, because you're going to have to invite a lot of people who have no idea what a prioritized youth culture looks like if they haven't seen it.
Another, for our youth ministry, we had an amazing kickoff celebration, almost 70 students. But as the sessions went on, our numbers dropped drastically. Our students seemed very uninterested. How do you think we could fix this?
Yeah, I would say fine tuning your sessions. So what does that look like? Just as a team, evaluate what are kids thinking or feeling or doing when they walk in the room. So like just as a team specifically, let's fine tune that to think through what's happening in their world, and are there ways we can elevate how we interact or engage in that too? Like, where are these teenagers coming from? Are you coming straight from a mass? Are these teenagers getting dropped off? Are these teenagers coming from sports? Are these, like, what does it look like, so you can kind of be prepared in that? And I think another part is really kind of just expanding the relationships with parents. So thinking through like, okay, what does that look like for parents who may be like, yeah, we love the idea of this, but we also have 100 things every week on the calendar, and kind of helping get to know some parents who might give you some real good intel into like why they may not be able to prioritize it and what does that look like. I think there is something to be said too about the number question is hard, because there's days where you're like, where are they? And I'll tell you what, I do that with my parishes. I'm like, why did that parish? What is going on with that parish right now? We care so deeply about those teenagers, and we want them there. And there's something that is life-giving when their energy feeds off of each other as well in that too. So rejoicing in the celebration that they came and that they want to be there, and keeping those communication lines open however you can in a safe environment way with them, and then obviously with their families, I think is really important. But just being visible and approachable and consistent, I do think still matters in helping people invite. And then the other thing would be just kind of get creative. Like, is there a way that you've never invited teenagers before that would actually be successful? Could you go and drop things at their houses? Let's go back to those COVID days were actually kind of fun, I'll be honest. But like the idea around like, is there something about going to their games and being in their community and being in their space? And maybe there's a way that you can have Domino's pizza on their campus after school, because them and their friends are kind of hanging out afterwards, having practice or extracurriculars or something like that too. But there's a lot going on in a teenager's world. And so at the end of it, we don't want to take an approach of like, where have you been, or guilt them into it. We always want them to feel like the doors are open and we're so happy to see you when you're there. And the better we do that, sometimes the more effort they put into wanting to be there as well.
Great advice. Another question. You talked about having a supportive priest. Mine has been very hands-off, and I feel very unsupported by him, let alone him supporting the ministry. Any recommendations?
I would ask the first questions of, what does their conversations usually look like? How frequently does she talk with her priest? My guy was kind of hands-off too. I mean, I know it kind of talked like he was an advocate, and he was, but he was very hands-off and kind of like, you do you, Katie, let me know when you need something kind of thing. Which is great, because one time I was like, hey, I could really use an assistant. I think the questions are like, what does he want for ministry? And how often have you guys had those conversations, youth minister to priest? Like, what's his goal? What's his experience with youth ministry? Not only at your current parish, but in past parishes. Was he ever a teen with youth ministry? Like, kind of getting a sense of what his institutional history around youth ministry is, and get some on that. And then even just asking like, what would he love to see in the next 3 to 5 years? And let him know you're working on a strategic plan and you're trying to figure out what the Lord's asking you to do to help continuously reach more teenagers. Being involved in those, trying to help him feel like he's at least sharing whatever it is, might give you some insight into what's going on. I would also think too that it's helpful. Sometimes they're around for a long time. My guy was around for a long time. Sometimes they kind of know they're headed out the door in the next year or so, and sometimes that affects how much they get involved or not. So maybe sometimes the timeline might be good to come up. But I would also say the last thing is giving him a pulse and updates on things, however that looks. Like even asking him, hey, Father, I'd love to make sure that you just have some intel on what we're up to. And so what's the best format for me to share that with you? I joked about it in my presentation, but I would literally walk out of Mass after he would recess out, and I would say, hey, this kid was at church, his family's this name as a reminder, this happened in their life, I want you to be aware of it, they're going to come out of Mass in a second.
Oh, so yeah.
Those small nudges of intel helped him feel successful in connecting with that teenager, which was something that he wasn't always the easiest to do with. And the last thing is maybe asking him if you'd be interested in coming and participating or what that would look like. So we loved a good Bother the Father night where we would just say, come and let us ask you questions. And it was really fun. And then one kid was like, are you old enough to even know, did you have color TV as a kid or something like that? I was like, oh my gosh, she's never coming back. Just maybe kind of getting a little bit more inquisitive on if he would like to or how he would like to be involved.
Wonderful. Katie, tell us a little bit. You mentioned that you go to parishes, right? And you do some training, or tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, our team specifically as the outreach team really loves to ensure we're empowering and setting everyone up for success. So we focus on mostly core team trainings where we go. And so that we travel around the country, we visit it with our parishes, everything from all these great questions that were asked today to even more just specific around like our life team resources and implementing that really strategically and well. We have found that parishes who have longevity, not only for their program, but specifically for the people who are in the role they were trained. And we would expect that, right? And so we want people to be trained in that. And that is one of the blessings. I find there's a lot of gifts in standing in a parish hall or a church basement and understanding someone's world and landscape. And so we go out and we go connect with them, hopefully. So it's a blessing. We offer trainings as well nationally and love to have people come join us too. So if you're in the market for a good training for 2025, we can promise some of those, and you can find all of that on our website too.
That's awesome. And how about resources too? Like you just threw out like several great fun ideas to do, right? Like just rolling off your tongue, but because of your experience. But for others, they might not really, know all of those. Are there resources for these kinds of things?
Oh my goodness gracious, absolutely. There's resources everywhere. The Life Team resources I find to be so incredibly comprehensive. There's catechetical sessions, social for community building, issue sessions, small group guides, like core training guides. And the hope is that we are allowing youth leaders to feel not only equipped to go out and do really good ministry, but that they don't have to sit behind a desk. Because it's really, I mean, you need, like, being with teenagers is so life-giving when you're in youth ministry. And so creating that space. So specifically, I'll always let you know that the Life Teen resources, our Life Teen resources for high school, our EDGE resources for middle school. We have a confirmation program called Purpose. And then we just created a brand new scalable set of life nights called Kickstart for maybe our smaller or rural parishes. So if you ever want to see a sample of it, I've got a handful of them. I'd be loving to share. So.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, I will include your information and information to Life Teen in the follow-up email that I send out tomorrow.
Thanks.
So,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
It's exciting to talk to youth ministers around the country. It brings me a lot of life. So.
Absolutely. We're so grateful that you have joined us today and sharing your passion with us, and all that you have learned. And we know how important the youth are in our church, and hopefully we can show that to them, right, in maybe an even better way than we are doing, or continue the great work that we are doing. I know so many of you are doing great work in your parish. And so Life Teen has resources. We have various resources also. So we're just offering you today 15% off your order at avemariapress.com using webinar 1210 for today's date. Hope you enjoyed that. And then would love for you to join us next Tuesday. We're going to be talking about the Jubilee year. Joan Watson is a tour guide. She's the expert on all things Rome and the Jubilee year. And so she's going to talk about how our parishes and our schools can celebrate this special year, even if we're not flying to Rome, right? It's kind of like a little armchair pilgrimage, so to speak. So another opportunity to add to your parish ministries and your own personal faith too. So thank you again, Katie. Thank you for everybody who has joined us today. Continued happy Advent, blessed Christmas. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Take care, Katie. Thank you. Bye-bye.